In today's video, I wanted to continue with my journey through the East Empire Company's questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind's Blood Moon expansion. Last time, I met with the faction's factor on Solstheim, Carnius Magius. Through Magius, I met the second in command, Falco Galenis. Both men have had a hand in building the colony of Ravenrock. However, their means and methods are quite different. Carnius wants things done as soon as possible and is only in it for the riches. Meanwhile, Falco cares more about the workers and doing things the right way. I was forced to pick a side, and while I'm going to show off both, the story continues with helping out Falco. Returning to Falco, I asked him for another assignment. He starts out by saying that the mine's logs aren't making any sense. Ore is disappearing, and he points his finger at someone named Urin. However, he's going to need to show some proof of the theft. While Galenis won't divulge much more information, he's fairly sure that Marin is storing the ore in his personal chest. Falco hands me his house key and gives me permission to take a look. Entering the manor, things look pretty ordinary. Heading into Urin's bedroom, I located the chest, rubbed my hands together, and unlocked the container. As it would turn out, there was nothing inside. Maybe Galenis' hunch was wrong. In any case, I returned to the second in command and reported my findings, or lack thereof. He was sure his source was sound though, and telling the truth, but regardless, the only thing left to do is to catch Urin in the act. He's located in the mines, but Galenis warns me to stay out of sight so as to not tip him off. Entering the caves, Marin can be located fairly close to the entrance by one of the side rooms. For fun, I tried interacting with the Dark Elf. Lo and behold, his dialogue was quite suspect and he ended up disappearing, so I essentially failed the quest. Reverting back and doing this by the book, I followed Marin through the mines until finally he stopped by a main chamber. As soon as another worker passed and left the area, he began sneaking. Following him further, he wandered into one of the side tunnels which ended up leading to a storage room. This room contained ebony ore deposits as well as containers filled with the raw material. Confronting Marin, he was quite surprised to see me, saying he had a perfectly good explanation. Waiting to hear it, he stumbled over his words and then came clean. Apparently, Carnius put him up to this, and he said he'd kill the Dunmer if he didn't steal from the colony. Taking this information back to Falco, surprisingly, he was unsurprised. He had a feeling that Magius had a hand in this. Now that there's a witness, Galenis asks me to confront Carnius with the matter. In the meantime, he'll lock up Urin in the mines until a verdict has been passed. Recalling to Fort Frostmoth, I barged into the factor's room and brought up the Dark Elf. Of course, Carnius played coy. He called Marin a liar and a thief, but he assured me that he had nothing to do with it. As I was leaving, he said that he'd personally take care of the matter, and take care of it he did. Upon returning to the colony, Falco said that the Urin-Marin dilemma had been settled. When I asked how, he told me that the miner was found dead shortly after I left. Unfortunately, there are no witnesses to the murder nor any proof that it was Carnius. However, Falco deeply believes that it was. Regardless, Galenis says that at least there won't be any more thievery in the colony. As a thank you, he gives me 500 gold, and with that, thus ends the quest to catch a thief. I had to wait a few days before my next assignment was ready. However, once the wait was over, I noticed that a new structure had been built right by where Falco was standing. It was the colony's bar, and coincidentally, the point of interest for my next quest. Asking Galenis for more work, he says that something has gone wrong with someone named Seller Favelnum. According to Falco, he's been trying to fight everyone who enters the bar. No one knows what's gotten into him, but Galenis tasks me with trying to calm him down. Getting close to the tavern's doors, an NPC begins to speak with me. She's an older Dunmer woman and apparently got wind of my task. Drelora Favelnum, Seller's wife, begs me not to hurt him. She explains that he's been sick lately and he's tired of being old and feeling useless. However, even she's unsure why he's been having these outbursts. In any case, she asks me not to fight back as he can't keep up for very long. Entering the bar, I started a quick chat with the barkeep when all of a sudden, an elderly Dunmer male approached me. He seemed angry and asked if they sent me here to deal with him. He asks if I'm a coward like the rest of them and says that he wants to go out with a bang. Seller throws up his fists and begins attacking me. Wanting to respect his wife as well as Falco's wishes, I stayed my blade and wandered around the bar. Eventually, after enough evading, Sellers spoke with me once more. He said it was enough and pleaded for me to fight back. This was when I got to dive into the problem. He says he can't fight anymore and asks me to just kill him. He doesn't want to live like this. When I asked him why he'd want to die, he said he's old, his health is failing, he's of no use in the mines, and that he's a burden to his family. I told him though to think about his wife, and Sellers said that she'd be better off without him. I told him that this wasn't the only solution, and he said that he doesn't want to go out like this, but he doesn't want Jalora to have to take care of him. He doesn't want his wife to see him waste away, and he asks one more time for me to kill him. When I once again tell him no, he finally comes to his senses. Sellers snaps out of his slump and realizes that there's a lot left to live for. He apologizes and promises that he'll try to look at the bright side of things. With my job wrapped up here, I left the bar. Jalora's response was brief, but she thanked me for saving her husband. Reporting my success to Falco, he was happy that I showed compassion and didn't kill the old man. He gives me 1,500 septums, and with that, thus ends the quest, Bar Brawl. Now, this next quest was quite the doozy for me, and you'll soon see why in just a moment. Speaking with Falco again, I asked him for another assignment. He informs me that something happened in the mines. The workers stumbled on an ancient Nordic burial ground. There's a block of ice in there that they can't seem to get through. This is when Falco drops a bit of a bomb on me. He says that there was a group of Nords on Solstheim that might have known about it, but their leader, Graring, is apparently dead, so now we'll never figure it out. Confused, I asked about Graring. All Falco told me is that he's an outcast who lives up in the Isenfir Plains. It seemed like I was blocked from continuing the rest of this questline. It was really strange too, as I don't remember this leader dying, nor do I remember killing him. However, after a few moments, I realized what had actually happened, and I knew this day would come to bite me in the back. During Blood Moon's main questline, I turned into a werewolf. When you become a werewolf, any human somewhat nearby aggroes onto you. Rewinding a bit back to the first time I walked onto Solstheim, I remember seeing Graring and his gang out by a shack. I didn't know who they were, but I was more than certain they served some kind of purpose. Fast forward a bit, after a huge werewolf bender, slashing my way through the Skull, bandits, and Nords of every kind, I remember Graring and his gang having disappeared. My only assumption is that they aggroed onto me and got caught in the crossfire. So, with the 3 members of his clan dead, it looks like this quest is impossible to do. Or it would be if it weren't for console commands. While it's not a perfect performance, and I had a lot of fiddling to do, I was able to make things work with discovery in the mine. Even though my stages and journal entries were choppy and forced, I'll do my best to retell how the story was supposed to go. Resurrecting Graring, he wasn't all that happy to see me. I had to calm him down with some scrolls, and even so, I had to take his ancient Nord pickaxe by force. He would have given it to me regardless, but I just took it the only way that I could in the moment. Now, upon my first arrival, Graring and his companions were supposed to be attacked by an NPC named Coventina Collada, an Imperial assassin. I must have killed her too in one of my werewolf frenzies. She was nowhere to be found. Even with console commands, I wasn't able to bring her back. Regardless, this NPC was apparently sent by Carnius, a foreshadow of things to come. After defeating her, you earn Graring and his companions' trust. This is when he explains what this precious material really is. The Skull considered the Stalrim to be holy. During the Great War with the Dark Elves, many heroes fell in battle. Some could not be returned to Skyrim and were buried here. Great magics were worked on their tombs to protect their belongings from grave robbers and their corpses from worse things. Energy was drawn from the land itself, and our heroes were encased in tombs of ice. That ice is Stalrim. We learn that Stalrim can be forged much like iron or steel. We were made outcasts for it. The Skull are too narrow-minded to understand its practical value. Some, like this woman, hear of it and come seeking it, but will not get it from us. You, however, have earned my respect. We will now see if you can truly be trusted. Take this pickaxe and use it to chip off a piece of Stalrim. Bring that piece to me. This is when the player can return to Raven Rock and head into the mines. Following the tunnels deep into the earth, you'll eventually land on a chamber that was previously blocked by stone. This chamber looks similar to the crypts, barrows, and burial grounds found throughout Solstheim. Encased in a tomb of ice are the remains of an old Nordic warrior. Interacting with the Stallroom while the pickaxe is in your inventory, you can pick up one sample of the incredibly rare material. Returning to Graring, he sends you off to speak with one of his companions, Einar and Haidar. The two NPCs will ask if you'd like to craft some weapons or armor with it. Each piece only requires one sample of Stallroom. However, the Stallroom is finite. There are only 26 pieces placed around Solstheim, and once they're gone, that's it. After 2 days' time, you can return to the Nordic camp and receive your Stallroom equipment. While this quest is mostly used as a way to get the player to explore the local dungeons, it also establishes trade relations between Solstheim's natives and the East Empire Company. Returning to Falco and reporting your success, Glennis acknowledges the importance of this bond. He recognizes why it was important that we got to the material before Carnius could. As a reward, he gives me 1,000 gold, and with that, thus ends the quest, Discovery in the Mine. Speaking with Falco again, I asked him for my next assignment. The Imperial told me that this task was of the utmost importance. A report needs to be delivered to Carnius within the next 5 hours. He tells me to make haste and head for the fort straight away. For fun, I peeked at it. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything juicy or interesting detailed on there. It simply reported that everything was fine and dandy. Wasting no more time, I recalled to the fort and shot for Magius's room. To my surprise, the Factor was nowhere to be found. Instead, standing outside of his quarters was a new NPC named Constance Atreus. Speaking with him, he asked if I was here to see Carnius. Atreus was quite sarcastic and snobby. He said that Magius wasn't here at the moment and that he's going to be disappointed that the report couldn't get delivered on time. Getting further into detail, Constance does reveal that the Factor made his way to the shipwreck out by the colony. He finishes by saying that I might be able to catch him on time. However, this is when a trap spell sets off on me. It's called Trespasser's Bane, and it drains agility as well as speed, plus it burdens the player. Constance doesn't seem to care at all about what had just happened, and it adds to the player's trials and tribulations of reaching Carnius in time. Luckily for me, my character has a lot of magical resistance as well as the boots of blinding speed, so I didn't really feel the effects of this curse. I was originally going to take a boat ride over, but the UASP brings up a great point. Running over will take up more real-world time but less in-game time, whereas boating presents the opposite. So, gunning past Raven Rock and fighting through various enemies in the wilderness, I eventually made it to the ship's crash site. Carnius was standing by Elberoth's dead body and even had an Imperial escort with him. Confronting the Factor, I handed over the report in an orderly fashion and on time. Carnius kept his cool, but admitted to being surprised at my punctuality. He said I could inform Falco that he had received the report, and that's exactly what I did. Glennis was relieved that we made the deadline. He believes that Magius created that timeline out of spite and that the Factor never planned on receiving the report. As a reward, Falco gifts me 1,000 gold. With that, thus ends the quest, Race Against the Clock. Speaking with Falco, I asked him for my next assignment. The second in command informed me that there's been a spike in Spriggan sightings recently. They gather by a group of trees on the eastern side of the colony, exactly where the EEC plans to expand their operations. Glennis asks me to take care of the ones that are out there right now, and once I'm successful, I'm to look for someone named Una Lauren for our next course of action. Almost immediately after the conversation ends, a Spriggan charged at me from the tree line. In total, I needed to defeat 4 of them. They aren't tricky enemies, they're just rather irritating to fight. They need to be defeated 3 times before they're actually dead. So, it essentially feels like I'm fighting 12 different NPCs. Of course, no one in the colony bothers to help, but that's also because there aren't any guards. At least, not yet. Finally, once all of the Spriggans were bested, I was able to seek out Unal over in the bar. Lauren explained that there's some kind of enchantment on the grove of trees. For whatever reason, they're practically impossible to cut down. However, Unal believes that that can be fixed if we can find their roots. While he believes they're deep underground, the workers in the mine might have come across them. So, descending into the caves below and seeking out Gradian Corellius, he directs me to a side tunnel accessible via the northern passage. That led me to a new zone called the Abandoned Mineshaft. Inside there, I found the roots to the trees above. They led all the way down into a small body of water. Ascending back up, I fetched the Dunmer and brought him to the bottom of the grove. Lauren thinks the best way to weaken the trees would be by poisoning the water supply. He asked me to retrieve 5 samples of bitter green petals. Unnel mentions though that these can only be found on Vardenfell. So, as pointed out by the UESP, the easiest way to obtain these is by casting Almcivi Intervention. This brought me to the temple in Nissus. Inside the temple is the NPC Zanmulk Samalamus, who sells the petals. For just 28 gold, I bought all 5 samples and quickly returned to Unnel on Solstheim. Handing over the bittergreens, he sent me off and said that I could report back to Falco. The Imperial was glad to hear that the matter had been dealt with. Ideally, the Spriggans will stop attacking and the expansion can continue. As a reward, he gives me 2,000 gold. With that, thus ends the quest, Raising the Forest. This next mission is rather simple. Chatting with Falco, he realizes that it's time for Raven Rock to employ some guards. While he recognizes that I've held down the colony well enough, there should be full-time security patrolling the village. He wants me to ask around for volunteers first before we start assigning people to the role. It's safe to say that not many citizens here want to be a guard. Most of the workers are content with their current position and don't really consider themselves to be fighters. However, there are 3 NPCs who are more than willing to take up the mantle. First is an Imperial named Afer Flatchus who could be found in the bar. He's looking for a career change and this could be his next big move. Next is the Imperial Gradian Corellius who could be found in the mines. He's always believed that the colony needed more security and this is his time to step up into that role. The final NPC is a Dunmer named Garnus Uvalin. He can be found on the eastern side of the colony and he doesn't believe in turning down new opportunities. With 3 guards secured, I returned to Falco and relayed the news. He says that he needs some time to train and outfit them. According to the UESP, I was supposed to be paid out 1,000 gold, but the reward was never handed over. Regardless, after a few days, I returned to Raven Rock and saw the 3 men. They looked the part and even had a newfound superiority complex. With that, thus ends the quest, Hiring Guards. Speaking with Falco again, I asked him for my next assignment. This was when he hit me with a rather interesting one. Galenus believes that he's going to be assassinated. He's been hearing rumors and asks me to stay close. While he doesn't value his life that highly, he needs to stick around in order to counter Carnius's decisions. Shortly after ending that conversation, a Nord marksman runs up from behind one of the buildings and begins loosening some arrows. Scaring him off, the 3 guards begin to run after him. Right as that happens, an Imperial assassin charges him from behind, but I'm able to intercept him. Once he's been dealt with, one final Imperial marksman approaches from the north and begins to fire off more arrows. During my first attempt, I accidentally hit Galenus with a huge heavy attack. He wasn't very happy about it and targeted me right after. So reverting back, this time I was extra careful to watch where I was swinging and successfully staved off all of the attackers. Falco was pleased with my performance and as a token of his appreciation, gifted me 1,000 gold, 10 exclusive restore health potions, and an ice shield. While there aren't any enchantments on the shield, it certainly is a beautiful looking piece. With that, thus ends the quest, Protect Falco. This next quest is where we get to see the East Empire Company's climax. Waiting for a few days, I returned to Falco and asked for my next assignment. Galenus expressed his frustrations with Carnius. A shipment of silver longswords arrived from the mainland, and of course, the Factor refuses to have them delivered to the colony. So, I need to go and fetch them from my good friend, Constance Atreus. Casting recall and seeking out the Imperial, Constance was less than enthusiastic to hand them over. He even said that they won't be of much help to the likes of me, whatever that's supposed to mean. Well, upon returning to the colony, I learned exactly what he meant by that. Chatting with Falco, he tells me that Raven Rock was the victim of a skull attack. He's unsure why they do something like this, as they've been peaceful with one another up until now. Unfortunately for the skull, the colony's defenses were better than they thought, and the group fled into the mines. However, there are still workers in there, and Falco fears for their safety. Galenus asks me to head on inside, clear out the remaining Nords, and rescue the workers. Now, if you've played through Blood Moon's main questline, you're probably thinking that that doesn't sound like the skull. Well, we'll soon find out exactly who these people are and who sent them. In total, there are 10 Nord barbarians found within the mines. Each NPC is level 30, and they can be challenging opponents. They hit for pretty good damage and are quite elusive. Solo, they could be dealt with rather quick and efficiently. Meanwhile, grouped up is where I had the most issues with them. They can easily overwhelm the player, break through your armor, and whittle down your health. If you're like me, then it's best to keep them at bay by fighting one or two at a time. The final few Nords were located by the abandoned mineshaft. After defeating them, I was looting their bodies and found a tattered note. This note is what really shakes things up. It reads, "Land somewhere northeast of the colony. Wait until Bard has left the site. The Breton can be identified based on descriptions previously provided. Kill every living thing in the colony. Be sure to leave behind some skull armor and weapons. There needs to be evidence readily available, should the Empire choose to investigate. Payment will be delivered at the designated meeting point once proof of the task's completion is presented. Signed, C." I think we can all guess who this C is. Taking the note back outside to Falco, he asks for a moment to read it. Resting for a bit and then returning to the Imperial, he comes to the obvious conclusion. In an attempt to sabotage Raven Rock, Carneus hired some Nords to dress like the Skull and to attack the colony. Falco wants me to confront Carneus on this matter and to out him for his involvement in the scheme. Wasting no time, I recalled to Fort Frostmoth, wandered into Magius's chambers, closed the door behind me, and spoke with the Factor. He started out the conversation by saying that I wasn't supposed to survive the Skull attack, which is an obvious red flag. He then says that I've ruined everything. All the work, money, and effort he put into sabotaging Falco's efforts. He says it's all my fault, to which a fight then breaks out. I expected the Carneus battle to be a breeze, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Magius fights with a Stalram mace. Where he got it from is unknown, but that thing can do damage. Truly though, his most irritating asset was his ability to heal mid-fight. I'm unsure if it was a potion or some sort of enchantment, but every time his health dropped, even by a bit, he'd be able to regenerate it right back. The Factor bested me more than a few times. Finally though, I found the technique that worked best for my character. Using the Spear of the Hunter, I paralyzed Carneus and swung away with an enchanted blade. With this method, I could get him to use all of his health regen right out of the gate. Eventually, he had nothing left in the tank, was paralyzed on the spot, and could be defeated rather easily. With the Factor dead, I stepped up the constants and intimidated him a bit. He didn't want the rest of the smoke and said that it was best I just return to Falco. In doing so, Galenus apologized for what I had to go through. However, with Carneus gone, Raven Rock will be a better place. What matters now is picking a new Factor. Falco admits to not wanting the job, and as such, he can't think of a better fit for it than myself. He congratulates me on my promotion as I'm now the head of the Raven Rock division of the East Empire Company. That was certainly a jam-packed mission, and while it seems like that was the end, there's still one more to go. With that, thus ends the quest, Under Siege. Returning to Falco after a couple of days, I asked him if there was any work left in Raven Rock. He said it wasn't really an assignment, but it still needed to get done. I have to build my own personal estate. Galenus says it was clear Carneus never intended on staying, so he never built a home here. However, that just means I get to pick where I want the Factor's estate to be built. I'm to go and speak with Aldem Berendis, the lead of the construction team. Chatting with the Dunmer, he tells me that they've selected 3 different construction sites. They're all marked by a torch, and I can pick which spot I'd like my estate built on. The first torch is by the entrance to the east. The second torch is by the entrance to the west. And the third one is a little closer to the shoreline, behind a stretch of houses. For some reason, to me, the easternmost site felt the most secure. Close to the walls, surrounded by other structures, and easy access in and out of the colony. Fetching Aldem, I brought him over and told him this was where I wanted my house. Berendis then said to come back in 5 days' time. Waiting around, I finally got the journal update and returned to the colony. My Factor's estate was marvelous. It was a huge structure built exactly where I wanted it. Aldem was waiting for me outside, and while the conversation was brief, he hoped that I'd like their build. The interior was magnificent. While it wasn't dissimilar from the other designs I had seen around Raven Rock, it came with all the bells and whistles. A dining area, storage units, plenty of containers, my own personal quarters, and multiple floors. This acts as the ultimate reward for completing the questline, and it certainly one-ups Caius' bachelor pad back in Balmora. Attempting to speak with Falco, he doesn't have much else for me. There aren't any other matters to tend to in Raven Rock. So that officially wraps up the East Empire Company's questline, or at least Falco Galenis' side of things. The next order of operations is to see what would happen if I were to aid Carnius Magius.